there's Dr. Rajiv Party is here, and he has an incredible story about his journey to being here today. And Dr. Ken Stoller is here. I see that he's just arrived. Very good. Ken's a dear friend. Come on up, guys. And then Savarna, if you want to take a seat, and then we're going to figure out how to do this to get the microphone over there. But if just to introduce these folks. Dr. Stoller and I became friends, about a year or two ago, I guess. Has it been? And he was, we met him as usual. We met in an unusual way. Dr. Stoller's son passed away at the age of 16. His name is Galen. And I'm going to have him talk about this, but I just want to let you lay the groundwork for him anyway. And Galen and Dr. Stoller had studied at UCLA back, and correct me if any part of this is wrong, but he had studied at UCLA some years ago, and at that time had befriended a medium that became a lifelong friend. And really was one of the, when his son passed away, it was one of the first people that he called. And he'll talk about his journey, because he was terribly distraught, as any parent would be. But at some point, just to get to why we're here, his son contacted him, and basically was his advice, I guess you could call it. The son was to say, "Dad, you need to write a book." And so some time went by, and at some point he had a conversation with his son again, and he was saying, I can't get around to this book. I'm trying to work on my life and how I got to this point. And his son said, "Oh, Dad, it's a book about me. I want to write the book with you. The two of us will write this book." As odd as that sounds. And so that together, they wrote this book. It's called My Life After Life. And when I came upon the book, when I opened it up, I saw the same accounts that were in Michael Newton's work. Identical accounts. So I contacted Ken and said, "Are you aware of Michael Newton's work?" Thought maybe there was a chance he was. He said, "No, I'm not." So we became friends, and I'm just, he might mention this, I hope he does, but recently a woman in St. Louis sent him an email and said, "My husband of 50 years, I think it was it 50? Had passed away." He's like, "Who are you, Rich?" My husband of 50 years had passed away, and this is a woman he didn't know. She had found him on the internet, and her husband, and she had a friend who was a medium, and the medium did a reading with her, and the husband came clearly through to this woman, okay? And in the reading, he said, "You need to pick up a copy of a book called My Life After Life. It's written by a kid that's over here, and we're all talking about it. And here's what's on the cover of the book." And described the photograph of Galen that's on the cover of the book. When those kind of things happen, and I've seen the email, and even as a skeptic, I went immediately, "Oh, come on, is it possible that she had seen that your book was online?" And said, No. He wrote to her and said, she knew the medium very well. The medium neither one of them had heard of the book. And it wasn't like, he had just put it on, put it online, so it was a new thing. So people in the afterlife were talking about this work. And subsequently, Dr. Stoller has continued his conversations with his son and continued what's going on. His description of where he is in the realm that he is in. And I highly recommend taking a look at it. And Dr. Party we've just met today, but he came to me through Robin, who happens to be here, who's been with the Institute of Near-Death Studies. Cheryl's here as well. And these are groups around the world that gather people who had near-death experiences that are very powerful and dramatic, and then they get together and discuss, what that's about. I've spoken to a number of those groups, and what I found is that it's this profound exploration into the afterlife, but they don't have a context for why it happened or what they saw. And so, for example, a person has a near-death experience and they see the same thing that Savarna is talking about Council of Elders or a Library of Souls, but they have this personal experience, and when they come back from being almost dead, they have this unfortunate thing of like, how do I connect to the planet again? There's this wonderful place over there. What am I doing here? But this is a way to give context. So, Dr. Party, actually I wrote it down. I will say it because, here we go, a world-class practicing, I don't want you to have to say this, cardiac anesthesiologist, okay, whose life was ripped apart following a diagnosis of prostate cancer. A routine surgery to treat it instead led to numerous complications, chronic pain, a fever, and then at some point he had a near-death experience, journeyed through several realms of consciousness and beyond the light at the end of the tunnel. And during his NDE, he learned his life's purpose to be a healer of the soul, especially diseases of the soul, of the energy body, depression, etc., etc. So he, being a doctor in that world, had a near-death experience and realized that his purpose in life was to share that experience with us. And the reason I wanted to have this panel together is to have them talk about their journey to this world, and then at some point, if Savarna could, if she hears something in their experience that is similar to something she's heard, to connect those dots. You see? Like I say, in Ken's case, his son was in a classroom in the afterlife. That's what caught my attention. And there's been quite a few descriptions of people having sessions where they see themselves in a classroom in the afterlife. So I just wanted to see if we can tie those two together. But Ken, would you mind to go first? And do you want me to just move the mic over there, or do you want to stand up? What do you think?
Move the mic.
All right. Let's just take it off. Want to just pass it back and forth? Old school, rock and roll. Yeah, we do have a... And as I pull the... just want to pass this back and forth, because you can hear, you need it. Okay? And, I'm sorry. And we'll, at some point we'll open up to questions. So very good. So Ken, if you could just tell your story and then pass it along to Dr. Party, and then we'll go back and forth. Make sense?
How many hours do you want to
6 hours. Thank you.
No, how much time?
We have an hour.
The medium from UCLA, because I was part of the now long defunct and I guess there's no other way to describe it. The UCLA Parapsychology Lab. UCLA now disavows any knowledge of its existence, like Mission Impossible. Yeah. I mean, and you can show them newspaper reports and articles in the Bruin, and they don't care. It doesn't exist. And I think what happened originally was, and I know this is sort of off topic, but I'm free associating, is that Jolly West was a member of MK Ultra, and he was the head of the Neuropsychiatric Institute at UCLA, and the lab was getting a little too much publicity, and it was making him extremely nervous because he was doing some really nasty things. I don't know, we don't have the time to talk about MK Ultra, but you guys can Google it later. And but it's all about mind control and Sirhan. It gets all very complicated. So it didn't help that Thelma Moss, who was the head of the lab, started going off the hizzy with Kirlian photography. She was convinced that it was a representation of the human aura, which it was not. And her grants started drying up, and she wasn't publishing anything, so it became very easy, actually, to extinguish the lab at that time. And I mean, I was just an undergraduate volunteer. And but you picked your own sort of niche in this lab. You did whatever you wanted to do. I mean, no one was paying you. And I had an undergraduate fellowship in the Department of Anesthesiology at the time. And so 4 floors down, 4 corridors over was the Neuropsychiatric Institute. The whole place was connected. You never had a leak go outside. And so I hung out in my spare time at the parapsychology lab, and I investigated mediums there, sort of a forerunner of what some people, ended up doing later. And so the medium I actually investigated the most was a woman in Pasadena who's now long deceased. She was the reincarnation of one of the Bronte sisters. But the medium that Rich was talking about, the one that allowed me to speak to my son and have a very confusing conversation with him the night of the train accident that caused him to pass, I first started working with in 1996. In fact, I just started reading the transcripts I created, the pages and hundreds of pages of transcripts I created from my conversations with her in 1996. And of course, I later found out that her soul in its last linear time Earth incarnation was Trotsky, of all people. But a friend of mine who died of breast cancer, it took her almost a year for her to convince me to even call her, because I was sort of like that, I'm done with that, I'm past that, I don't do that anymore. And this gal who basically lived a life of obscuration, which is not unusual if you've had a very, very famous life. Just previously, she was the reincarnation of Thomas Jefferson, although you wouldn't know it. So she was highly intellectual, she was gay, and we were both involved in the animal rights movement, and she was absolutely brilliant. And it was all about freedom and scientific integrity with her, and no one listened to her. No one absolutely ignored her. She was ignored completely. And she was always impoverished and died impoverished, and worked with the archetype of crazy woman. And I listened to her. I was her friend, and anyway, so she was the one who introduced me to Audrey, and Audrey doesn't advertise, and she doesn't have a website, although I keep telling her to have one. And she was the one that put me in touch with my dad. She actually knew Galen. She had met him and was trying to teach him art at one time. And it took me 2 years to understand that conversation, because it was all over the place in terms of linear time. No one's really prepared to talk to you the day that they cross over. At least Galen wasn't. So information was coming through from all different places, and it was very confusing and very emotionally upsetting, really, because I just didn't understand so much of it. And again, it took 2 years for me to piece it all together.
What did he say? What did Galen say to you the first time?
I asked him. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, "Oh, he's joking around with his brother, his younger brother." I think he said yes, and I'm going, "What's he talking about?" I mean, my girlfriend had just had an abortion the day before, my ex-girlfriend. So, I was talking, does this have anything to do with the abortion? And this was not his younger physical brother from our family. As it turned out, had I stayed together with Galen's mother and other decisions had they been made, there was a soul that was going to incarnate as Galen's younger brother. But instead of incarnating as Galen's younger brother, when that opportunity didn't happen, that soul reincarnated as a child in 1946 or 7, something like that. You go, what? And he actually died when he was 8 years old on a farm in Minnesota. Of probably an antibiotic treatable respiratory infection, but and so his soul never experienced the 20th century. His soul was able to pick whatever opportunity it wanted to from a timeline that was in advance linearly from his last experience. So that soul chose, went back in time, and that child actually died the year I was born. And he was hanging out and was very connected to Galen in terms of he was waiting to have this experience with an older brother. And it was Galen that was going to be his older brother. And he ended up having this experience with him. So as his spiritual younger brother, they still became brothers, but not on this side, on that side. And so that was, that's described in that first book. There's 2 books out. There's My Life After Life, and the second book, which is Life Chapters, Extraordinary Afterlives of People You've Never Heard of. And the third book, which actually, Rich, you've written the introduction. Yeah, you wrote the introduction for that.
Tell us a little bit about the second book, the chapters. So just talk a little bit about what Galen's, and pardon me for interrupting, but talk a little bit about Galen's, what he's doing over there now, and how that tied into that second book.
All right, so the first book, answered a lot of curiosity questions about what happened. Even though Galen's experience is uniquely his own, it answers a lot of questions about what that experience is for somebody at that particular level that he found himself. And there's many levels. You end up at the level that best suits you. So, for example, if you happen to be a polar bear, you're not sent to the African savannah. It doesn't suit you. And if you're an elephant, you don't get sent to a level that's better suited for a polar bear. It's not that one level is necessarily better than another. It's about your vibration and what you're comfortable with and where you're going to get the best experience for your growth. So, yes, some levels are much less restrictive, and some are much more restrictive, and all of that. But there's no kind of judgmental. Well, this is a better level to be at, than this level. It's all about serving you, and so the second book, because Galen asked me, what should we do for the second book? And I said, I don't want it to be, if the first book was an apple pie, I don't want the second book to be cherry pie. And I had just seen Iron Man 2, I think, it was a horrible sequel. And I said, I don't want, a bad sequel, for the second book. So I said, I want it to be completely different. So what he ended up doing was recounting his visits. He would actually, extremely curious about other people's stories, how they got there, what they've been doing while they're there. He would be like almost like a social worker, interviewing people and finding out about their situation and how they got there and why they're still there, how long they've been there, and things like that. So it's a vignette of these pieces of people's lives and afterlives, and pieced all together. Was that an accurate description of?
Yeah, no, and I was just almost like an ambassador, where people, discarnate beings, would appear. I just remember specifically an event when the tsunami had happened, a family of people from that region were there. But they weren't comfortable while they were there. They weren't sure why they were there. And Galen felt it wasn't his place to tell them, you're dead now, and it's okay. But he would go and ask them their situation. It was almost like an ambassador just greeting people who were coming into this realm who were confused. Almost everyone he spoke to in the second book is confused about why they're there. And then he would see them later on in the journey, and they would now be reconciled. Oh, I see, I've passed on, and this is where I am now, and this is the experience I'm having now.
Right, that particular family from Thailand felt that they were fulfilling a family debt. That's why they all died together. And this was about balancing some family debt that had happened. So, which it was not. So anyways, those are the two books that are out, and I've been very busy, extremely busy. I can't tell you how busy I've been. And the fact that the books haven't really been selling, and the fact that I know I'm writing these books or putting these books together for people who aren't even born yet, it's kind of really slowed me up in terms of getting them out. I almost feel like Red Fox in one of his skits. People ask me when I'm coming out with my next album, when you buy this one. So I mean, we already have book 3, book 4. There's even a book 5 that's not really in the series, but it's all about using the tarot cards to explain universal truths and laws. And I'm just keeping them kind of warmed up on the tulip bulb shelf because I almost feel like the timing isn't right yet. So,
well, let me ask Savarna, if you don't mind, pass it on down to Savarna, and then Rajiv, we're going to come back to you. Savarna, have you had any experience with clients where they have either experienced in a past life memory or in actual, during a session, a realm or an arena or a place that's confusing, or if you could just talk about any experiences you've had like that?
Yeah, for some people, and they say that sometimes they're more practiced souls, that they know just what to do, and they go, okay, I know I'm going there. But many people, it's not the case, and they might go through a feeling like a veils or a fog or a mist, and there's a little bit of confusion. They have to get their bearings, and different things happen for people. And again, I'm grateful for the Newton statements that really are succinct and potent statements that he's found through trial and error that really help people navigate through and really help people to connect with a guiding force, whether they see it or not. And it also, there's ways for the facilitator to negotiate with the guides. Like, are you going to help? Help us now. And they do. And I was looking back through some notes, and people experience, sometimes they'll see someone, but I noticed hands are a common theme. Like there's all these hands that are like inviting or gesturing out or helping people along. So that confusion sometimes happens, but not for long. There's always something that comes along that's helpful. And as I was listening, my mind was going to, not so much the LBL thing, but my hospice work. And there was this amazing woman, Marjorie, that I got to be with for some months before she died. And she said, I'm really ready to go. I'm so ready to go. And she had led a life of service as a nurse and all kinds of things. And she was, I want to go because I want to help people cross over. This really is my life's work, her afterlife's work. She had such a resonance for it, such an enthusiasm for it. And she had no fear of dying. And so when she did die, boy, she just felt like she was right here with me, right here. And she was working with me, with my hospice clients. And I felt like she could really go as an ambassador, as a helper, you know, if anyone were to die and had a little need of a nudge. So I think there is that component. One's our guides, you know, that are really our guides. There's a component of something that can draw people, like these hands, or whatever that hand thing is a metaphor. And Patty's nodding like,
Absolutely.
you know all about that one, huh?
Yeah, after 9/11, the whole sky opened up. It was all filled with hands bringing them
Wow.
up.
Yeah. And there's these beings that just want to get to work. And it's not all personal learning. People have jobs to do over there that they choose to do, and they want to serve. So this one wonderful woman, Marjorie, I believe, just went off to work, and she was part of that as well.
And I found, Ken, in Galen's account, at some point he realized that this person who greeted him right upon his death was his spirit guide. And then he goes to see him in the book a number of times to ask questions. And the questions are always answered with a little bit like, well, is that what you want to learn now? Are you ready for that? And are these accounts of him going into a classroom where he didn't, it's not like he saw a class schedule and showed up there. He would just sort of like felt, oh, it's time to go to class. And then he saw himself in these classrooms. We'll come back to this. Dr. Party, if you don't mind, would you tell us your story?
Yeah. First of all, you heard him say, right, my last name is Party and I'm a medical doctor. So it goes Dr. Party. And I'm an anesthesiologist, so many times in the morning when I went to my patients, before surgery, said, my name is Dr. Party, they would say, oh yeah. They used to think that I've taken the name myself because I'm going to get the morphine, laughing gas. This name has been a fun name to grow up with, but sometimes it has landed me in trouble too. I was working in a very small rural hospital, Lindsay, in Central California. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, a lady comes over 70 years old who has difficulty breathing, and her son brought her there. And the nurse panicked on seeing the lady in such difficult distress, started saying, party, party, party. And the son got mad, my mom can't breathe, and he was saying, party, party, party. What had happened was the nurse panicked herself. Instead of saying Dr. Party on the intercom, she started saying, party, party. It has been a fun name, and when I was single, I used to say, hi, actually the first name mine is Raj, and that means the king. So the full name used to be, I'm the king of parties. Okay, now to the serious stuff. I'm going to be talking to you about 2 things in my life. One, now, I was not prepared for that, but I had a past life regression twice, and I want to talk to you about that. My first life regression was with Dr. Brian Weiss. You must have heard about him.
Yes.
But that was about 10 years ago. What had happened, I had an injury to my right wrist, and that became chronic pain. It was not getting better. I was off for about 6 months. And then to pass my time, I was going to these conferences and things. I wanted to see Dr. Deepak Chopra. It was I Can Do It Health conference, and then Brian Weiss was there too. So I did his workshop, and there in my past life, I saw myself as a medieval prince, a cruel prince, who was whipping the farmers. They were wearing brown, tattered clothes, and I was ordering my soldiers to whip them too, And then I asked for forgiveness from them, and they forgave me. And then 2 weeks later, my hand got better and I went to work. I didn't know what to make of it. Like in present life, I went to the past life and asked for forgiveness. And then, second birth I remember, that was with another doctor, but he is from India, Dr. Newton. And that time, I was a poppy farmer in about 1800s in Afghanistan. And I was taking the sap myself. And I became addicted to it. And now that addiction, when I had my other surgeries, manifested as chronic pain pills addiction. So it was, both the things were related to my past life. And the other thing I'm going to talk to you today is about an experience, my near-death experience, about 3 years ago, which changed my life forever. I became a healthier, happier, and more peaceful person. It really transformed me. Where I lived, what work I did, how I ate, what did I drink, what car I drove, what house I lived, everything changed. And some of them I took a conscious decision, some things just happened on their own. Before I can explain you what transformation I had, this little bit I want to give you a little background about myself. I was born and raised in a middle-class family in India. My father was a very strict dad. I had a mixed feelings towards him all the time. Like he used to believe, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I had my shares of meetings. They were kind of, he was, in today's definition, you would call it abusive. And I still remember him right now. He used to say, when a nail is bent, a nail which you put in, you have to hammer it to straighten it. If the sun is bent, you have to hammer. So, I was an average student, but in 10th grade I got into real bad company. I started smoking, I started drinking, I started cooking, and watched the movies all day long instead of going to school. And one day I was caught, and I was in big trouble. Of course I got the spanking. And then somehow, not because of the spanking, there was a big shift in me, transformation in me, that I started from the bottom of the class. I was repeating my 10th grade. I started standing first and second in my class. And then I thought of becoming a doctor. And my mother came to the vice principal to add biology to my subjects. And he was so rude, and tells my mother, "Do you think your son will be a doctor one day?" And he made my mother cry so much. Then that day I realized, and I made a promise to myself, I will become a doctor. And I say that I became a doctor to wipe my mother's tears. So after finishing medical school, which was very difficult, very tough, 15 to 16 hour studies quite often, I came to United States in 1982. I only had $500 in my pocket in New York. And my friend picked me up. We were 4 guys living in a 1-bedroom apartment. And before I could practice in the United States, I do extra training like residency. I worked myself as a security guard, drove a taxi, sold newspapers on subway station. And the good part was when I was driving a taxi, I would tell them I'm a doctor who's struggling, and they would give me a higher tip that time. Sympathy factor. So after that, I passed my exams and did a residency in anthropology, and that was at Vanderbilt University, Nashville, Tennessee. From there, I moved to California because my sister used to live here. In the meantime, I also got married, and you won't believe it. I had only met my wife one time before marriage. It was just a semi-arranged marriage. Like, I saw her for the first time on 29th January, got engaged to her on 31st January. I only had 2 weeks, and got married to her on 12th February. And then my mother, as if she's giving me a home assignment, homework, tells me, "My son, I want to be grandmother soon." I said, "Mama, don't worry, I'm working very hard at it." and literally we had a baby boy 9 months, 10 days later. So after my marriage and finishing my residency, I moved to California, Bakersfield. Originally I had gone to Bakersfield from Los Angeles only to do a 2 weeks temporary work, but now it's 25 years and I'm still there. Because we grew up in a small town atmosphere, we started liking, and we had friends and everything. Now my goal was to achieve an American dream. I did achieve an American dream, but my American dream became a runaway American dream. My religion became materialism, and my God became the mighty dollar. And I was caught into the extreme materialistic cycle. I built bigger and bigger houses, drove fancier and fancier cars, and like last house, before my present house, was 10,000 square foot house on a golf course and a lake. So much so, like we had to use iPhones to communicate with the kids. Are they in the house or they're not in the house? And now we have moved to a smaller house. Now we can just hear them. And actually, I tell my wife, the reverse is true too. They can hear us too. So we had to be careful. So I was caught with this bug of extreme materialism. And that was what my life was. I was working harder and harder. Before I built my house, I used to work 50 hours a week. By the time I built my house, I was working 70 hours a week. And I was wondering at times, I used to tell my friends, do I own the house or the house owns me? Because I'm always working for the house. And cars-wise, I had a sports Mercedes, my wife had a sports BMW, and top of it I had a Hummer. And Hummer was extreme SUV, gave only 8 miles a gallon, but I did not care about that because I could afford it. And I used to feel like a king when I drove it, and especially if a little car would cut me off, I would go behind them with a copper colored tank, and they would look up and just move away. I was a bad boy that time. In spite of all these toys and this material success, my heart felt empty. It was, something was missing, that fulfillment was not there, no matter how hard I worked, how many toys I got, how big a house I built. My life was going on like this. Then, in August of 2008, Me and my wife were sitting in the backyard and having some tea, English tea, around 4 o'clock, admiring our own house and where we have come from, where we are now. Then the phone rang. On the phone was my urologist. He said, Raj, are you sitting or standing? He said, I told him, I'm standing. He said, better sit down. I sat down. He said, I have a good news and a bad news. I said, give me the bad news first. The bad news is that I have prostate cancer. The good news is that is in the early stages, and if we do the surgery, it will be cured. So I was in a state of shock that time. Why me at this age? I'm having these problems. And so we decided to proceed with the surgery. We flew all the way to Florida because the expert, laparoscopically, through the holes was there. The surgery went fine, but it left me with a lot of complications. I developed incontinence, chronic pain, that led to depression, and for chronic pain, they prescribed me painkillers, narcotics, and then I got addicted to narcotics. And I was the one who used to write the prescriptions for narcotics because I had a pain practice too. And it may surprise you that nowadays, the prescription pain medicines are a bigger problem than the illegal drugs. Bigger problem, like almost so many people are addicted to OxyContin, Vicodin, Narco, morphine, etc. So I got addicted myself. But then, 2 years later from the surgery, some of the complications were not getting better, especially I could not control the bodily functions. So I went to UCLA and had another surgery done. So far I had total of 7 surgeries, because of the scarring and, it will cause more pain and I could not go to the bathroom, so on and so forth. But now at UCLA, I got a surgery done. They implanted a device in me so I could control. But 2-3 days later, I started having fever. About it was 101, 102. I was having redness. I was having swelling. So the doctor prescribed some antibiotics, thinking the infection will subside with those, but it did not get better. About our 10th day, I was having severe pain, severe redness, and I had a fever of 105. So they rushed me to UCLA hospital from Bakersfield. I'm originally from Bakersfield nowadays. Originally I'm from India, but right now I'm from Bakersfield. So from Bakersfield, my wife drove, crying, and this was a very excruciating, painful trip to UCLA. And then they put me on heavy-duty IV antibiotics, Vanco and gentamicin, and they also gave me IV narcotic, like morphine or Demerol to take care of the pain. But I was not getting better. So on Christmas Day 2010, they rushed me to the hospital operating room for emergency surgery. And when the surgery happened, after general anesthesia was induced, about 15-20 minutes later, I saw myself floating above near the ceiling. I had an out-of-body experience. I could hear the conversation, and the anesthesiologist was telling a joke, which I can't repeat it, but he was telling a joke, and I knew myself as an anesthesiologist.
Oh,
as
tell the
part of my
joke.
job.
Tell the joke. Come on. We're here. Tell the joke.
You all are adults? Okay. There was one lady who just had some surgery done, and the doctor comes to check her out how she's doing. The doctor, she says, I have only one question. When can I have sex? The doctor was surprised. Why, and he told her, in about 2 to 3 weeks. But to the patient, the doctor looked very surprised and perplexed. And so she asked, what's wrong with my question? She said, because as an ENT doctor, nobody has asked me, when can I have sex after tonsillectomy?
So you heard that joke while you were out of body.
Yeah.
Not a joke you'd ever heard before in your life.
No. And then I verified with the anesthesiologist in the recovery room. But he said, oh, you must be light in anesthesia at that time, because hearing is the last sensation to go and the first to come back. If somebody's light on anesthesia, they can hear things. That's why if I'm tracking a joke, I make sure the patient is deep, deep under. I don't want him to be thinking, or her to be thinking, what is he doing, putting me to sleep and watching me or telling jokes. So there, after that, I also saw myself, at the same time I was in the operating room, my awareness was in India, seeing my mother and sister sitting on a sofa. My mom was wearing a green sari, My sister was wearing a blue sweater and a blue jean. And it was cold time there, winter. Like here it was 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, it was evening, and they were sitting next to a heater discussing what they're going to have for food and so on, just general talk. I would like to say my awareness from the operating room went to a very serene, happy place, but no. It went first to a place where there was darkness, there was fire, there was thunderstorm, and there were entities with crooked teeth and horns moving around. And I soon realized I was not in heaven for sure.
What did if you could, what did the entities look like?
You know, they had like with horns on top.
Horns.
Yeah, horns. Yeah, you know my accent.
And if we can pause for 1 second, Savarna, have you ever had any clients that have had a realm or an arena where that they saw themselves in?
No.
Go ahead. Here, he's got the mic.
No, I haven't in my experience for that.
What about my previous births I talked? You ever, like the 2 previous births I talked,
Mhm.
you must have experienced that kind of.
Oh, yes, people in past life, and as you saw a connection between like the opium and then the drugs later, there were certain proclivities there, and there's all kinds of connections, and all kinds of healings that can come.
Yeah, like my wrist healing, you know, I
Yeah.
have this big scar from the surgery.
Uh-huh.
So but I just wanted to clarify, that's an unusual
That's
visual
unusual.
for a person to have. Go ahead, please continue, Dr. Rajiv. Go ahead.
So I soon realized I was in a hellish realm, and I was asking this question, why am I here? Then I was given the understanding. So far, I have led a very selfish, very materialistic life, and I was not kind to my patients. I still remember a lady coming to my pain practice, about, you know, ladies, you know, they live longer. And she was about 75-year-old, and she had arthritis. And I just literally in 5 minutes gave her the prescription and walked out of the room. When she wanted to talk to me, she wanted to have a little touch, you know, on the shoulder, or you know, hand on the hand, because her husband was dying of cancer, and she just wanted, you know, a doctor. Yeah, exactly. And I realized my mistakes, and then the hell started fading away. And my father showed up with his father on his side, and my father, like a little boy, shepherded me towards the tunnel. And my father gave me some piece of advice. He said, my son, if you keep your consciousness clear and have faith and are truthful to your own self, the universe will take care of you. And these are the same exact words he had said about 20 years ago when he died from complications in Fresno after a heart surgery. So I'll be in brief, and then in the tunnel, I had a review of my present life again, you know, in detail, the good and the bad. You know, how many people I had harmed, how many selfish I had been, stepping on their toes to get ahead. Because I was the chief of anesthesia at Bakersfield Heart Hospital, so it did mean being manipulative and getting things done. And I also had a review of my past lives, and 2 of the births were what I told you right now. And one birth was, I saw myself as a little child in Rome, I think Rome or where, and as a Rome and small child. And from there, my consciousness crossed the tunnel. Crossing the tunnel, there was a bright light, and I was welcomed by 2 young, robust, very lively, very soothing men. And they spoke to me, but they did not speak like with mouth, but telepathically, more like knowing. They told me they were my guardian angels, and there was Michael and Raphael. It made total sense for me later on when I studied Michael for strength, and Raphael is a guardian angel for doctors, and also I needed a lot of healing in my own life. From there, they guided me towards a light being, and I saw meadows with roses of different colors, a clear stream was flowing through, and there were mountains. And when I was in the presence of the light being, like about 1,000 suns, but it did not hurt the eyes. And I was given the understanding that I will be fine, but I have to go back, but change my life totally. To live a life of spirituality, give up my job as an anesthesiologist, which was very lucrative. Maybe it's not for you guys, I was making $50,000, $60,000 a month. I'll have to sell my house, drive simpler cars, just simplify my life and be a nicer person. And then when I was there, also the words flashed, A Course in Miracles, which I didn't know what it was that time. And then I woke up in the recovery room with a jolt. And I wanted to go on my knees, where I had just had surgery, could not, to show gratitude for the place I had been, what the joy it had been. And then I verified with the anesthesiologist the joke, and his comment was, you must have been light that time under anesthesia. But the nurse was more receptive. She was, yeah, these things she has heard before. And then my life started changing by my action, or the actions happened on their own. For example, my friend, a plastic surgeon, came to see me after my surgery at my home. And then he said, I like your house. And it was not unsafe. I said, okay, I've been told to live a simple life and everything. So he bought my house and I bought his smaller house.
Wow.
And we just exchanged houses. It was not on sale. It was no real estate agent involved. We just got some escrow company to do the transaction. And then my lease for my Mercedes expired. I did not get another luxury car. I just got a Toyota Camry that time. Because my life, and I also sold my Hummer. So my life literally and figuratively went from Hummer to hybrid. And I got a hybrid car. It gives me 36 to 40 miles a gallon, depending on how I drive it. Because I do care for nature right now. Nature is an extension of our body. And then my nature changed. You know, how I reacted to my wife, how I reacted to my kids. Like with my wife, I became a much caring. I fell in love with her again. Like one of the things I did was, I sent her a dozen roses, and she says, today is, she's a dentist, not a Valentine's Day, it's not my birthday, it's not my anniversary. And why did you send it? I said, for you, with me, every day is a Valentine's Day. And so I became a more caring husband. And then I became a better doctor. And now I have sympathy. I sat down and talked to the patients, but I gave up my career as an anesthesiologist to become a healer of the soul, to help people with addictions, with chronic pain and depression. Depression was one thing which I had to fight a lot when all these things were going in my life. The most amazing thing was, like, I was from a brink of sepsis, septic, which is severe infection. I got better in 72 hours and I was discharged home. I still had open wounds, which took a few weeks to heal, but I was fit enough to be discharged home. My addiction to the narcotics was gone. And then I was remembering, 12th step, like Bill says, one of the easiest way our addiction gets better is when you have a spiritual experience. And this was my spiritual experience. But the depression did not go right away. It gradually went away because the doctor was on 3 antidepressants and to gradually taper them off. So there are no more side effects. And from there, I realized my purpose is to be, as I said, to be healer. And the 3 truths which I realized in the realm, number 1 was that there is life after death, and we all are connected to each other, for we are all made of love. And there is a loving entity, the supreme intelligence, which is the basis of all what exists. Then I started studying the course, and from my study of the course and experience from the other realm, I formulated a mantra for myself, on which I'm writing a book also on that: forgive, love, and heal. And forgiveness I wrote first, because forgiveness is the ground on which the healing takes place. And the hardest for me was to forgive myself. Like, I was upset, like, why did I get addicted to these things? Why? Then I had to forgive God even, because I was mad at God. Why did you have messed my life up? Like, it was already messed from inside, but outside at least it was very good. And then I started loving myself, started loving others, and then the healing happened. I can keep going, but I'll just
All right, well,
here.
that's fantastic. Very good. No, we're not done yet. I was just gonna, go ahead, one more thing, go ahead.
One sentence, like I used to put people to sleep Now I wake them up.
Ah, that's good. Well, I was going to ask, before we break, and we'll do some questions as well, but Ken, you're a pretty world-renowned pediatrician, and you're also involved with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is an unusual journey that, Ken, you've been on. And I wonder if your experience with connecting, almost like the overview effect, connecting to spirit, and being more connected in some way to spirit, has altered your medical path of your own life.
Hello?
Maybe not.
I mean, you can't go through these experiences without having your path not changed on some level. But I was I was already leading a life of poverty, so I was already giving away most of my treatments, and I would joke with people. I would say if someone had said to me, 10, 12 years ago, would you like to be a pioneer in a brand new field of medicine and be world renowned for your expertise? And I'd say, sure, why not? And is it okay if you don't make any money for the next, 10 years? What? And I would have said, no, I can't do that. But, that's what, I was already, sort of, there. So.
Well, then perhaps the question is, do you see how the energy in medicine, as you've discovered, the journey you chose to be Ken, let's just say, for the sake of argument, you chose to use this healing energy to help people on the planet. And you were able to discover that going through that near-death experience. And I'm just wondering if that's been part of your consciousness at all, the idea of choosing to be Ken.
Absolutely. Basically, I would say that if there was a sea change, if there was a demarcation between the old Ken and the quote-unquote new Ken, was that day where I found the Indigo portal and inappropriately met up with Galen and walked through this portal thinking I could take my entire body and everything with me. And so, when I woke up in a pool of blood on the floor of a hotel with a broken nose and completely bit through my lip, and I would say the events that took place after that put me on a slightly different path, because I said, my old life is over, so that whatever time I have past this is really about letting my soul express itself through this vehicle to the full extent that I can let that happen, so that the personality and the ego end up being partners with the soul instead of fighting it or resisting it, that was much more integrated experience, and of course, if you guys haven't read my book, and as most people haven't, let alone know it exists.
But it's a huge bestseller in the afterlife.
Yes, and hey, they're translating.
They're pirating it.
They're pirating.
Sure, that's so much.
Let me just hold on one second, Ken. Can we open it up for some questions?
Yeah.
All right,
Sure.
Please. Anybody have any questions for Savarna, Dr. Party, and Dr. Stoller?
I understand when he said, a pediatrician, like I was already leading a life of poverty. I used to be a pediatrician before, and then I became an anesthesiologist, and overnight I worked much lesser, half the work, and doubled my income. So I was a pediatrician before.
Well, there you go. Anybody? Questions? In the corner.
Except for Dr. Party,
Yes, sir.
when you were out of your body and visited India, did you see anything happening with your family that you couldn't have guessed? and then later corroborated actually happened.
You know, the clothes they were wearing, you know, like that was more collaboration than just discussing food. Because my mom was wearing a green sari and I don't know which sari she wears which day. And I did verify with her about 5-6 years later, what were you guys doing on that particular Christmas day, Christmas Eve? No, it was Christmas evening. Yeah?
Z, you have a question?
Doctor,
Party.
Party, thank you. When you were talking about your abusive father, did it ever cross your mind that perhaps in a former life, you whipped him?
It did not cross, that time I was young, but that now I think that was possible.
Right.
It is possible that the law of karma, I'm getting paid what I did. Because he was whipped by his dad, and his dad was whipped by his dad. So it was continuing. At least I have broken this cycle that I didn't whip my kids. Though I have been abusive to them before my NDE verbally, you know. But at least I said I'll draw a line. I won't whip them. You know, so when they were small, I had slapped them once or twice, but not. Like when I was caught in 10th grade, I was hit with a cricket bat. You know, you can just imagine a baseball bat. I had blue marks that I could not go to school for 3 weeks. Black and blue marks.
Well, have you forgiven him?
When after my ND, I wrote for my mantra is forgive, love and heal. As a part of forgiving, I wrote a letter to him and then I burned that letter.
So that's a gift that he gave to you
Yeah,
that you can now thank him for. Very difficult gift,
very difficult.
but also a gift.
And also in my ND, he was the one who came to my rescue when I was in the hellish run and guided me towards the tunnel.
Brilliant. All right, everybody, on that, Gary, sorry, go ahead.
Just one, it's a quick question, it's a really long answer, so I'll just ask the question really as a brief comment. Your experiences, actually all three of your experiences are extraordinary and very meaningful, both to you personally, but also to the greater community. And we're having a very precious moment right now, because, you know, until very recently, we didn't have microphones.
Yeah.
We didn't have airplanes. We didn't have the capability to be all in this room at the same time, having this special moment, and also hearing the fact that that somehow the veil is getting thinner. Somehow we're having these conversations about not just near-death experiences and so on, and communicating with one's sons and the like, but also this notion that we can have life between life experiences, that we can have a healing of the soul, for example, and have it be consistent with contemporary science. Something's changing in our species' awareness, talk about waking up as opposed to going to sleep, that we didn't have as a culture, or multiple cultures, even though the Hindus and so on have believed in all of these realms. Do you have any sense of why today? What is it about, I don't mean this precise moment, this physical time, but in this collective time, that this awakening is occurring?
Well, I'll tell you what my son has to say, and that is that we've entered the age of the heart chakra. So now it's just entered it, so it's, you know, the age of the solar plexus is going to, you know, die a slow death, you know, over the next, 100 years. But, and even 100 years from now, he said most people will not be born with their heart chakras open, but there will be enough who either get there or are born with their heart chakras open for that to really anchor itself in. But that would be his explanation.
Savarna, were you going to say something? Would you pass it on, please? Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking, have you noticed how fast life is? Even those little nano things, those flashes of information again. I think all of life is accelerating. And there's consequences to this acceleration. And so I think that one of the responses from Spirit is our growth also is being called to accelerate. So we have such a beautiful story. Drop all of that what he was talking about and come into forgiveness, healing, and love. So quick. How much can that impact one person's life and the ripple effect from here? And about the heart chakra and solar plexus, I just one comment, I'm thinking about the skepticism about all these kinds of things, but there's a way in which I think our intellect can come to serve us. And I got this notion from Raymond Moody, who's very much into Plato. He studies Plato. He loves logic. You know, the NDE things happened in his life, but he loves Plato. And he is trying to help people use logic to come to the conclusion that this is real. There's so many instances. It's just proof over and over and over again. So if you use logic, you have to come to accept that these things are not just woo-woo, not just paranormal, it's really part of this creation.
Part of normal.
Part of normal, part of normal. Yeah.
All right, folks, if you could take a break. Thank you so much. Let's hear it for our panel.